Imagine thinking you can hold the world's jugular vein between your fingers and squeeze whenever you feel like it. That is exactly what the commanders of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy thought they were doing in the early spring of 2026. They looked at the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow stretch of water that carries 20% of the entire planet's oil supply, and they thought they owned it. They thought the United States would just sit back and watch while they turned the world's most critical choke point into their own personal parking lot. But as they are quickly finding out, playing with naval mines in the presence of the U.S. Navy is like poking a sleeping grizzly bear with a stick made of premium Wagyu steak. It is not just a bad idea. It is a fast track to finding out exactly why the United States spends more on its military than the next 10 countries combined. The IRGCN actually believed they were being clever, deploying their little speedboats under the cover of darkness, like a group of teenagers trying to TP a house. They started dropping their Maham series mines into the water, thinking these underwater paperweights would be enough to scare off the most powerful fleet in human history. They even had the audacity to try and implement a toll system, as if the Strait of Hormuz was some dusty back road in the middle of nowhere rather than an international waterway. If you wanted to pass, you had to pay the IRGCN or risk hitting one of their hidden surprises lurking beneath the waves. It was a level of arrogance that can only be described as delusional, and the price for that delusion was about to be paid in full. Before we get into the absolute beatdown that followed, let's look at what the Iranians were actually putting into the water. They were relying on the Maham 3 and the Maham 7, two pieces of technology that Iran claims are state-of-the-art influence mines. The Maham 3 is a moored mine, weighing about 300 kilograms, anchored to the seabed, and floating just below the surface like a hungry predator. It uses magnetic and acoustic sensors designed to trigger when it hears the specific signature of a passing ship. Then there is the Maham 7, a 220-kilogram conical hunk of metal that sits on the bottom of the seafloor in shallower zones. Iran calls it a stealth mine because of its shape, but calling this thing stealthy is like putting a cardboard box over a drum kit and calling it a silent instrument. Against a merchant tanker from the 1980s, these might have been a problem, but against the 2026 United States Navy, they are essentially expensive lawn ornaments. On the other side of the equation, you have the U.S. assets that were sent in to clean up the mess. Enter the USS Frank E. Peterson and the USS Michael Murphy, two Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers that cost over $2 billion each. These ships aren't just boats. They are floating fortresses equipped with the AEGS combat system, a technological marvel that can track hundreds of targets simultaneously. When these destroyers arrived, they didn't just bring guns and missiles. They brought the future of naval warfare. We're talking about the Knifefish, an autonomous underwater vehicle that looks like a high-tech torpedo but acts like a bloodhound. The Knifefish uses low-frequency broadband synthetic aperture sonar to look through the water and identify mines that are hidden in the mud or disguised by the seafloor. And for the final touch, the U.S. deployed the Archerfish, an airborne mine neutralization system launched from MH-60S Seahawk helicopters. The Archerfish is essentially a remote-controlled underwater drone that finds the mine, looks it in the eye, and then detonates a shaped charge to erase it from existence. The Iranian IRGCN speedboats thought they were being sneaky, operating in the shadows of the night to lay their Maham mines. They would zip out from the coast, drop their cargo, and zip back, thinking their small radar cross-section made them invisible. What they didn't realize is that the U.S. Navy was watching them from altitudes and frequencies. they can't even fathom. US drones and satellite intelligence were tracking every single wake, every engine heat signature, and every splash in the water. It was like the Iranians were trying to play hide-and-seek with a god who has thermal vision and a photographic memory. The US watched as 20,000 seafarers were stranded, and as global oil prices began to climb because of these tall tactics, the Americans didn't rush in blindly. They waited, gathered every bit of data, and let the Iranians get comfortable in their false sense of security. The IRGC's commanders were probably patting themselves on the back, thinking they had finally found a way to checkmate the Americans. They didn't realize they were already in the trap, and the door was about to be slammed shut with the force of 1,000 suns. Then came the flex, the moment where the United States decided that enough was enough and the games were over. On April 23, 2026, the order came down directly from the Commander-in-Chief, and it was the most beautiful 3 words a US Navy captain can hear: shoot to kill. The directive was simple. If an Iranian boat is caught laying a mine, it is to be destroyed immediately. No warnings, no radio calls, no diplomatic gestures, just total and absolute elimination. Suddenly, those stealthy Iranian speedboats found themselves being hunted by the very technology they thought they could evade. As soon as a Maham mine hit the water, an Archerfish was usually 5 minutes away from turning it into scrap metal. And if an IRGCN crew lingered too long, they would look up to see an MH-60S Seahawk hovering overhead, armed to the teeth and ready to enforce the new rules of engagement. In one instance, an Iranian crew was so terrified when a US destroyer locked its fire control radar onto them that they accidentally dumped their entire cargo of mines in a single pile and fled back to shore. They didn't even bother to set the timers or the anchors. They just wanted to get away from the $2 billion predator that was staring them down. The US Navy didn't just clear the mines. They did it with a level of efficiency that was downright disrespectful. They were clearing lanes, fast store. Then the Iranians could even keep track of where they had put the mines in the first place. And that leads us to the most embarrassing part of this entire story. The moment where the IRGCN's master plan turned into a global comedy during the ceasefire talks in Islamabad. The Iranian negotiators had to admit something truly pathetic. They told the international community that they couldn't actually help reopen the strait because they had lost track of their own mines. They hadn't kept rigorous records, and because their technology is about as reliable as a 1990s dial-up modem, they didn't know where half of them were. Imagine the humiliation of trying to hold the world hostage, only to realize you've lost the keys to the handcuffs. The US officials just smiled and continued their clearance operations, using the Knifefish AUVs to find every single hidden Maham 7 that the Iranians had forgotten. By the time the dust settled, the IRGCN looked like a group of amateurs who had tried to play chess against a supercomputer. Their tall system was gone. Their secret mines were being detonated for target practice, and their reputation was in the trash. The Pentagon estimated it would take 6 months for full confidence to return to the shipping lanes. But the message was sent much faster than that. You do not block the US Navy, and you certainly do not try to extort the global economy with second-rate hardware. This entire incident serves as a stark reminder of what happens when a regional power forgets who truly rules the waves. The United States doesn't just have better ships, it has a level of technical mastery that makes enemy strategies obsolete before they are even executed. The Strait of Hormuz is back in business, and the IRGCN is back to hiding in their ports, hoping the Americans don't decide to come in after them. This is why you don't mess with the United States Navy. They see everything. They remember everything. and they have the tools to erase your master plan before you even finish your tea. What would you have done if you were the commander of the USS Frank E. Peterson that morning? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into American military dominance. Until next time, keep your eyes on the horizon and remember, the US Navy is always watching.